everyone. Welcome back to Overcoming Codependency, a journey to self-love and healthy relationships. I'm your host, Andy Anderson, co-founder of Avaya. Thank you again so much for joining us for this amazing event. We are talking with some amazing people. We're talking with doctors, we're talking with authors, therapists, psychologists, and so much more. And they are sharing with us about this topic of codependency, what it is, what it's not, and how we can all become aware of our codependent tendencies to overcome them and at the same time have amazing, healthy, loving relationships. So today our guest is going to talk about overcoming guilt, shame, and negative self-talk, which are all things that are very commonly seen in people who have codependency. So please welcome Rosemary O'Connor. Hi there.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited with all the great work you're doing, and so thank you so much for having me.
Well, right back at you. I love what you're up to in the world, and I want to tell everyone a little bit about you before we dive into some questions here. So Rosemary is the founder of ROC Recovery Services and Sober Mom's Guide. And with over 18 years of personal and professional experience, she has helped thousands of people recover from addiction through speaking, workshops, private coaching, TV interviews, radio webinars, articles, blogs, you name it. And actually in 2015, her first book was published, and it's called A Sober Mom's Guide to Recovery, Taking Care of Yourself to Take Care of Your Kids. And there's about a million other things that Rosemary has done, but I will digress and get on to the first question. So Rosemary, tell us a little bit about how you got into this line of work.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's see. Long story short, over 18 years ago, I was bottoming out in my alcoholism. I was separated from my now what I call husband, because I don't like the word ex-husband. I hired an 11-year-old babysitter to watch my 2, 5, and 8-year-old. And I left at 7 p.m. in the evening and didn't come home until the next morning. I had left in this gorgeous sequin gown with my hair done and, looking good, so I thought. And when I strolled in that morning, that gown was still on, although it had throw up all over it. I only had one shoe. I was still somewhat drunk. And I walked into my 3 beautiful kids sitting on the couch with eyes like this. Like, they didn't see me as this drunk fall down mom. I hadn't gotten there yet. I was still the soccer mom and very involved in their school, had lots of friends, a beautiful home, a nice car, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't what I thought a alcoholic was. I thought the alcoholic was the man on the park bench with the paper bag. And, I guess I would be called a high functioning on the outside, not internally. And so walked into those precious little kids still in their jammies. They had been up all night. The babysitter had called her mom, which was my best friend, and my soon-to-be ex-husband. And they were calling the police, the hospital, friends. Have you seen Rosemary? And it was just, that was not the mom I had set out to be. And my poor little 5-year-old son looked up at me with these gorgeous blue eyes, tugging on that dress, and looked up and said, "Mommy, are you okay?" Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I looked down and said, "Mommy's not okay," because that whole year I'd been pretending, wearing the mask of, as codependents do. Oh, I'm okay. Everything's fine. And so I entered into recovery. And my journey was, I eventually got certified to be a life coach when I was about 5 years sober. And I started working in the industry, coaching a lot of people struggling with many addictions. Codependency, alcoholism, drug addiction, sex, love, shopping, you name it. And I just, one foot in front of next step. And I loved the work. I was doing my life in recovery, was just blossoming. And yet I want to say very difficult at many times. My ex-husband started filing. He filed when I was 30 days sober. So early on, I was trying to raise these children and stay sober. And then when my book came out, Sober Mom's Guide to Recovery, it just took me into this whole other journey, and my passion really became helping women, and specifically moms. That's where my heart is. And to see a mom struggling with addiction and their kids and their families affected by it. So, as of today, that's where I'm at. I was just doing an intervention for a mom, 55 years old, and lost her 3 beautiful 20-year-old girls that want nothing to do with her. So I coach the women via FaceTime, phone. I'm busy developing more products on sobermomsguide.com to really help moms and women flourish in recovery. So that's the short story.
Thank you so much for sharing so authentically. And, this is a really unique interview. I don't think we have anybody talking about first of all, their recovery and their own alcoholism and that, and as that relates to the codependency. We have a lot of people talking around, right, being the partner of an alcoholic and all of that. So I think this is going to be really great to see this whole other experience, because from what I've been learning, codependency is underlying a lot of people who become alcoholics or addicts or all that stuff. So could you dive into that for us?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and especially for women, I would say my core wound is what I call it, or my coping mechanism. The alcohol used to soothe that uncomfortable codependency that I had no idea was going on. And when I couldn't control people, places, and things, I would drink. And the difference between me and as an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic, a codependent might still have all those issues, but their solution isn't to drink or pick up a drink or a drug. And if you have the brain chemically wired or genetically wired for addiction or alcoholism, that's when you spiral down. So, and for me, why I talk so much about the shame, the guilt, and the overwhelm is especially the shame and the guilt, and especially for mothers. It is so core, and hence all of our codependency, and especially in early recovery, just overcoming the guilt, so we become real. Like for me, I overspent, bought the kids everything to think that was going to help with my guilt, and that of course created more problems. My shopping addiction, spending addiction took off. Right. And all the people pleasing. If I couldn't please you, and if you didn't like me and love me, I would put on a new mask and say, oh, this is who you want me to be, so I'll be that. And so I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. I think that's
so many layers of addiction.
Absolutely. So before we dive into the guilt, shame, negative self-talk, because I really want to spend a lot of time on that, I'd love to get your take on just what codependency is. Obviously there's no one definition. Everybody has their own experience. And I think it seems to have, evolved over time and all of this, right? It used to be that we thought of it as, oh, it's the partner of the alcoholic. And that's kind of how the word began to take form for us. But now it's so many different things that occurs, and you don't need to be married to someone who's an addict to be alcoholic by any means. So what is your take on what codependency is?
Yeah, and I agree. It's such a big word. It's so misunderstood. There's so many facets to it, but I basically say it's doing for others what they can do for them, which is detrimental to not only the doer, but the person you're doing it for. So it's a lot of, we think we're helping, but we're actually hurting the other person. So as a codependent, I'm more concerned about your well-being than my well-being. And I put everybody and everything before my well-being. And again, for mothers, society tells us that we should do everything so our kids will be happy, and then we'll be happy. but really that's a lot of dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely right. Where, one thing I'm learning as I do these interviews is, right, we are all, of course, just responsible for our own personal happiness. And that is definitely something as, the mother of 2 stepdaughters and you being a mother of 3, yes, to wrap your head around, you're responsible for your happiness, and yet all of the messages that are, out there around you being responsible for everybody else's happiness, your partners, your dogs, your kids, and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
Right. And when we're doing that, we're giving somebody the power to say how our life is going to run. Like, I really thought that when I was married, my husband was in charge of my happiness. And I know where that came from, but I considered myself, and still do, a smart, intelligent woman that's really capable. But for whatever reason, I thought it was his job to make me happy, kind of like the Cinderella.
Yes.
Happily ever, once my prince arrives, and he saves me from myself. So, yeah.
Yes, those darned movies that we all, particularly little girls, watched.
Oh, yeah. The fantasy. It's a lot of fantasy thinking. What's interesting about codependency, too, and you, I'm sure, already know this, is that really the message we send to somebody when we are doing for them what they should be doing for themselves is that they're not capable of doing it. And really what that stems from is our being uncomfortable. Like, if my kids aren't doing well, whatever, and having this perfect life, then that says something about me, and I'm so uncomfortable with it. And so I'm going to go into managing, manipulating, mothering, so they're happy. So I remember when one of my, I don't like to mention the other people's issues in my life, but another person very close to me, very dear to me, was really struggling in his or her addiction. I remember thinking, if he was okay, I was okay. And if he wasn't okay, then I wasn't okay. And I realized, like, oh my God, I'm giving him the power to tell me that if I am, and really what that is me being uncomfortable with the fact, excuse me, that he's struggling.
Right. Yeah, that's something that's come up a few times in the series, and I too have struggled with that same thing of being okay with your partner's discomfort, right? Being okay with, or your children or whatever, right? I mean, it's codependency obviously strings through many relationships, not just your romantic partnerships, but yeah,
right.
it's
right.
that. Do you have any suggestions for people who, if they are becoming aware right in this moment of, man, I just can't deal with when someone else around me is sad or angry, I want to fix it. So what do you have suggestions for them on how to deal with that?
Oh, definitely. And that's why I wrote the book. There's a chapter on codependency, and really and I agree with you. It's all coming back to self-love. Here's a couple great suggestions, and I always give suggestions that have worked for me and suggestions that have worked for my clients. I love Melody Beattie and all the work that she does on codependency, Pia Melody on facing codependency, facing love addiction. Also a good therapist that specializes in codependency. Not every therapist understand that, just like a lot of therapists don't understand addiction, and doctors, and I won't get into all that. It's really, there's a lot of great workshops. There's a lot, Al-Anon is fabulous, or CODA. You can look those up on the internet. They're 12-step programs. Not everybody, that doesn't work for everybody, but it's saving millions of people's lives throughout the world. So many other suggestions.
That's good.
I really believe all these issues are spiritual holes in our soul, and so it's a for me, and it's a spiritual journey. But that support of a community is key. Yes. I believe it's kind of like we say, one alcoholic talking to another, and having somebody that's gone before you and is healed from it and have specific tools that can really help you, and a community that understands and supports you. And that's why 12 steps work so well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. The community
And,
aspect.
right. Right. And groups, like a lot of therapists run groups or communities that specifically deal with codependency. Because I've seen it kill people, literally. The drug addicts and alcoholics die from physical, the liver disease, the accidents, the losing their jobs. But when you look at codependency, it's a lot of the same issues. A lot of them you see with physical issues, heart attacks, cancer. You see them losing their jobs because they're spending so much time trying to fix the alcoholic. Their relationships are nightmares. Couples that have addicted children or addicted family members, they're often divorcing because there's such the tornado in their lives. So It affects, just like I always tell the family members that I'm working with that are suffering with a chemical dependent loved one, is that it mirrors whatever you want your loved one to do, whether it's get help, go to a meeting, stop drinking, stop using. Look in the mirror and give yourself that same gift. Get some help, stop your behavior. It's amazing how they mirror each other.
I love it. And I love that you shared like the reality of this condition, codependency, right? Or whatever. It's that it can kill people, and we can create, right, stuffing down emotions and not dealing with the stuff that has been driving us since we were kids, and all this stuff can kill people. I mean, I'm so glad you said that, because it gives me the chills just to get aware of that. And everyone watching right now, be aware of this. And there is help. There are communities. There are people like Rosemary. There are so many other people in the world that can help you, and get the help, right? If you're watching this right now, you're already right on taking a step to be getting that help. So thank you so much. Let's dive into the guilt. Okay. So I know this is a big part of what you do. So let's talk about guilt. Why is it such a common characteristic, right? A common thing that people struggle with when they're codependents, and how do you suggest they overcome the guilt?
Right. So I first want to make the difference between the differentiation between guilt and shame, because people get it mixed up often. So guilt is that there's the actual behavior, like I stole the cookie from the cookie jar and I ate the cookie. And so that's the behavior, and it's, if you're stealing, it's typically wrong. Now, shame says I'm a bad person because I did that. So they're really different. So with guilt, and especially with the moms I work with suffering from codependency or chemical addiction, really we've harmed our children, our family members in many ways. So it's this core, like I talked about earlier, that we feel so bad for what we can't change in the past that we create damage in the moment. So, and what I say about guilt is it really keeps you stuck in change. It's uncomfortable to change into healthy behavior. It's uncomfortable to stop doing for others what they could be doing for themselves. For instance, when my kids were young and I was newly sober, I felt so much guilt. So they'd ask me for something. Let's say they'd ask me for, I don't know, the third cookie, right? And I'd say no. And they would keep asking, and I'd say no. And then finally they'd ask so many times, and I said no so many times that I'd just say yes, okay. And I remember then I realized, oh God, my kids are running my household, and all they have, they're in relationship with me, and what they know is ask mom enough times, she's gonna just, give eventually. She's gonna give up. So this mentor I was working with said, and I got, frustrated, and I said, oh, I'm feeling so guilty about all the damage I caused, and they asked me, and I'm tired, and I just give up. And so I say yes. And she said, okay, great. I have a suggestion for you. I want you to get out a big piece of paper and write no means no and hang it on the refrigerator. And I said, oh, that's perfect for them. And she said, oh, no.
That's for you.
That's for you. And so I had to realize that my behavior, that I was really operating from shame, guilt about myself, and the shame, and that I wasn't forgiving myself. So in order to heal, you need to learn how to forgive yourself, not just in your head, but your heart, to really do that inner work. That, like for me, people say, how can you tell all about the stuff that you did in your disease? And, not coming home to your kids, driving drunk with my kids in the car, stealing money from their piggy banks, all these things so I could get my needs met. And I just said, I learned to forgive myself. Mm-hmm. And instead of staying in the guilt and the shame, I showed up present for the day, and to my best ability, showed up to be the best mom I could be. So when we're in our guilt, we're in the past. And when we're in the present, that's where healing can start. And so instead of focusing on all the really harmful stuff I did to my kids and myself, I could really look at, like I work with the women and the mothers I work with, is, well, what did you do well today? Well, you woke up, you didn't drink or use. You got them to, you fed them breakfast. You took them to school. You showed up for them. You apologized when you yelled or whatever. And so at the end of the day, you can look at yourself and say, wow, I really did a good job. Mm-hmm. But we have to learn to become our own cheerleaders, our own best friends. And really how I learned that is, what I say is, other women that had gone before me loved me until I could learn to love myself.
Awesome. Right. I love that. That's like holding the space for each other as we all learn to love ourselves, right? Loving each other along the way. And self-forgiveness is so huge. We actually, my partner Ike and I recently put out a film called Quantum Forgiveness. And it is all about, taking a look at not only, what others have, the experience you've had of others doing things to you throughout your life, your childhood, all that stuff, your parents, whoever, but also, you, and how important the self-forgiveness factor is, because without the self-forgiveness, it's, you're.
Yeah. And all that behavior, I was just operating on what used to, their survival techniques. Like as a kid, most of us have to do whatever it means to get our needs met. Now, right. My parents were loving, and they still are, fabulous people that taught me the difference between right and wrong. But I was number 3 of 7 kids born in 8.5 years.
Woo.
So my codependency started with, there are 4 kids below me that I can see what they, what mother or father can really get all those 7 kids' needs met. Right. And so that's where my codependency is. I can see it as clear as day now in my recovery, that a couple below me needed their shoes on. So I needed to help get their shoes on. And they were like, thank you, love you, Rosemary. So, that's where I got the love. And it just, then I did that with husband and men and kids and people. And I thought that doing things for others was how I was going to get self-love back, because I didn't know how to love myself.
Right.
So, and I love that quantum forgiveness. Mm-hmm. What I learned that under the forgiveness really needs to, that grief. The grief is under the forgiveness. Like so many people, it's hard to get to the grief of wishing the grief, the pain that I wish I was the mom back then that I wanted to be. And grieving the loss of maybe all my past history of all the wounds that people need to develop emotional, what I call emotional sobriety or emotional health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely been a common thread in this series is emotional health, emotional resilience, being able to be aware of our emotions and how to respond to our emotions and all of that stuff.
Right.
So, super
right.
Important.
Exactly.
So what about negative self-talk? I know that's another thing that you talk a lot about. And obviously negative self-talk, I would imagine, leads to things like guilt and shame and all that stuff. So
completely. That's because I always say that, no matter how smart we are, how talented we are. And I love all the studies being done on the brain and how powerful our brain is. What I heard recently is most of the average human being has 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are the same thoughts we are thinking day after day after day. So garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And if I'm telling myself that I'm not enough, and that's kind of my core wound, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, you're not doing well, you screwed up, you stupid, you loser, you're fat, you're dumb, you're ugly. Guess what I'm going to feel like all day long?
Crap, I think.
Crap, I can tell you for experience.
Yeah.
And it's, again, we're caught up in that not being present. Not being present, it's just that hamster wheel that, for what I say in addiction, it wants to get us so miserable that our only solution, if we don't have another tool, is to drink, because you're going to end up feeling so bad about yourself. And again, that's where the negative, the harmful behaviors come in. So I'm going to feel so bad about myself. So then I'm going to think, my unhealthy brain thinks, well, the way to make me feel better is to volunteer at everything anybody asks me to do. And then I'm exhausted. And then I'm mad at everybody because I said yes.
Right.
So that negative self-talk, like the disease, the dis-ease starts in our brain. So a lot of the work I do with my clients is learning how to create positive thoughts. Positive thoughts. What we put in is what is manifested. I'm very clear on that. And it's manifested in our energy, in our, we take ourselves wherever we go. So not our if we're in negative space, people around us feel it. And the opposite, if we're in positive love and positive healing and positive whatever the state is, we're going to bring that into our world.
So
yes.
What are some strategies that you have people work on to have these positive thoughts, like shift their thinking?
Yeah, it's many levels. So I really think it goes back to the forgiveness of, I'm not a bad person. I was really a wounded person trying to live in this world. Whatever negative thing anybody told me as a kid, it could have been a teacher, a parental figure, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend that told me who I was. Because as little kids, as you know, that's where our emotional health is created. And so we pick up where those kids are just products of their environment. And so it's to realize I'm not who other people tell me I am. And so it's that forgiveness and knowing that we come into this world, or before this world, loving, creative, whole beings. But unfortunately, we get into this crazy world we live in, and it's just whatever our environment is, if we don't have this self-knowledge about that we all are loving, capable, human, fabulous beings, then how can we live healthy in our own minds if we're carrying around all those negative self-talk? So it comes back to realizing that we are lovable and capable, and to start taking actions towards that. So if I'm telling myself, I can't get that job because I'm not good enough. Well, let's just start taking those steps towards and having somebody hold your hand through it. And then there's things like mantras that I really believe work. I have, because I've done it for myself. I have it if you look at my computer or in my car sometimes, or my bathroom mirror. I remember one of the first things I wrote in red lipstick, new in my recovery, is I like myself, I love myself, I forgive myself. And whenever I take a client to the mirror and have them do this, most break down in tears because they don't feel that way about themselves.
Right.
So it's about putting ourselves in healthy, loving environments, getting out of those toxic relationships where they're harmful, and really, again, back to that being in the environment where people love us until we can learn to love ourselves. And whether we're in a job, we're in an intimate relationship, communities, because we take ourselves wherever we go.
Right.
And we just keep repeating the same behavior over and over. Yeah. So it's forgiveness, it's being around healthy, loving, supportive people. I like mantras. I like, at the end of the day, a list of all the things you did well, instead of a list of all the things you didn't do, you didn't get done, and to really become your own cheerleader. That's just a few tools.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I love it. I love all of what you just shared. I think it's just so important. One of the things I have been exploring amidst this Overcoming Codependency series is control, because obviously, the term control freak kind of goes hand in hand with the codependent, right? And I know a lot of people struggle with this, particularly in their relationships, of trying to control their partner. Again, whether they're involved with someone who's drinking or addicted to drugs or not, just, maybe they're nothing like that is happening, but they're trying to control their partner, trying to control the outcome, trying to control that they're going to be together forever or whatever it is.
Right.
Or trying to control that they don't want to be together anymore, or, pushing them away. So do you have any, I guess, thoughts around the idea, this control topic, and how people can learn to surrender and let go?
Mm-hmm. All these are, again, slow processes and a lot of falling down and getting back up. I know for me, I tried to control everything because I didn't feel safe. So, and not only I didn't feel safe, I had this fantasy about how life should work. I had this fantasy of who my husband should be and what everything he should be doing to, again, make me happy. It all comes back to, this is going to sound unusual for some, but it comes back to really selfishness and self-seeking. So, and really that comes from, we used to try to get our needs met. They weren't met. So as young kids, so we managed, manipulated, or mothered, and there's a fourth one that I always forget, to get our needs met. So we think control is going to make us safe. We think it's going to give us the ability to feel okay in the world. But again, back to, it's giving others the power and the responsibility, giving others the responsibility to make us happy, to make us okay in the world. So, oh gosh, I could give you so many examples of that, not only personally. All I can say, it's a horrible way to live, to give your power and the responsibility of somebody else to decide if your day is going to be good or bad.
Right.
And the solution back to it is to look at our own behavior. And it's usually whatever I want you to do, like I'm pointing the finger at you, and then I got 3 pointing back at me. Mm-hmm. So you want that person to do one thing, find a way to triple the amount that, find another way. So for instance, let's say I want somebody to, whether it was my husband or my ex-husband, to really understand me, really get me. Well, guess what? I didn't really understand me. I didn't really get me. And I really many times had no clue what I wanted. But I wanted somebody else to figure it out, somebody else to tell me who I am. When again, back to like my kids, when I'm trying to control them and make their life be what I think it should look like, I'm miserable, and I can make them really miserable. But it's about coming back to, okay, the reality is no one's life's going to be perfect, including my children. And going back to feeling those feelings that look like it's going to kill me. And to sit with, like what I tell mothers and people I'm working with all the time, is if we can just take it, whatever's going on in the day, take a deep breath in and exhale out and say, all is well right now. because our heads tell us, really back to it, wants to get us miserable enough to act out in any unhealthy way because we don't like how everything is right in this moment. And that's all the way back to whether the house is on fire, okay, or you've lost a loved one. It doesn't feel okay. It's scary, it's sad, but most people don't want to feel those feelings. But often our head is sending our feelings the message. And most of the times our feelings are not facts. They're just the message. Like, for instance, let's say let's just say the people at work aren't behaving how I think they should be. But if they did, then I'd be happy, right?
Yep.
So let's say I think people should be doing more at work. That's all about, I think they should, it's fear-based. Most of our behavior is fear-based, of our bad behavior, or not bad, our harmful behaviors. So if I think other people should be doing X, Y, Z at work, and really I think they should be doing that so my life's better, my job's more secure, blah, blah, blah. I have to come back to what's the reason I'm trying to control you. And it's usually because I want you to, it all comes back to, I want to feel safe, and that's why I give my power away to you.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So convoluted.
Yeah.
Forget the question you asked.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. We were talking about control and, why so many codependents are trying to control the outcome of life, their partners, all that stuff. And safety really resonates with me. Anytime I hear anyone talk about safety as it relates to it, I get the chills, because clearly that's something that I, have struggled with in my own journey. It's that safety, and anyone watching right now who also gets that, sensation or resonance around that, it's, just be aware of it. It's good stuff to be aware of.
Right. And it could be physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety, all that. But most of the time we're not aware. We're really not aware of what's going on for us because we don't have enough self-knowledge about our behavior and why we do what we're doing. And so what I always say with clients I'm working with, it's awareness. First of all, we have to be aware. And then it's acceptance of people, places, and things. And then it's action. Again, back to I'm all about practical steps, or doing nothing too, to feel more safe in my life. Do I need to leave that relationship? Whether it's intimate or friendship or that relationship with work, do I need to make a change? You're not going to change the people out there. I promise you that. Promise you that. Try all you want. And like I always say, it's like you're in the ring with the pig and you're wrestling with the pig because you want that pig to, clean up and get out, stop wrestling. But pigs love to wrestle in the mud. They're as happy as can be. But guess what? You are exhausted. You got crap all over yourself. And the pig is as happy as a hog, but we're the miserable ones. So I'm like, get away from the pig. The pig's just being the pig. Pig is doing what the pig knows to do.
Right.
I love
that.
Yeah.
Get out of the pig pen, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. This is so enlightening, and I just love all your, personal experience and client experience that you're sharing with us. I do want to remind everybody, since we're running low on time, that there's a couple of buttons below the video that you're watching right now. One actually leads over to a really incredible free gift that Rosemary has for everybody, all the listeners of this event, and one leads over to a really great offer. So could you let us know what both of those are, Rosemary?
Sure. Well, the free gift is, it's all about overcoming guilt. So it's just a free ebook. It's simple. It's easy. It's got quick tips on what to do when you're feeling guilt, like in that moment. And then the other offer is I have this great e-course, and you do it at your own time, in your own house or wherever you are. And it's freedom from guilt, shame, and feeling overwhelmed. And normally it's $99, and we're offering it with a $20 coupon, so you can get it for $79. So It's a way. I've made it very affordable. Not everybody can afford to coach with me, so it's a great way to really be free of the guilt, shame, and overwhelm.
I love it. And I love that you brought the overwhelm into this conversation, because guilt, shame, right, very common things for codependents to be dealing with. But yes, the overwhelm is a whole other thing. I would imagine that also ties into, right, the perfectionistic nature of codependence, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that course, it's just again, quick tips of awareness and practical tips you can do to overcome it, because the guilt and shame creates the overwhelm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you hone in on practical tips. So, right, it's not just, reading this or reading that, it's actually applying something in your life so that we can actually get over this, right? We can overcome this.
Right. And it's just practice. And that's why I wrote my book. It's like, okay, I've read all these other books, but like, now what do I do? Like, if I eat the book, then maybe it'll get in me. But I was always like, okay, this is great knowledge, but now what do I actually do or not do?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What actions do we actually take? Because yes, we can read things all day long, but if we're not actually putting into play these strategies that you have for people or exercises that you take people through, then it's going to be challenging to, become aware of your negative self-talk or your guilt, your shame, and actually be, overcoming this codependency. So,
right. And just even one baby step makes huge changes in your life. Like, I'll tell moms, just say no to the next 3 demands somebody else asks of you. And maybe they'll do one of the 3. So it's just practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I even say these words, and I've said this on another interview before, when I first was super inspired to create this online series about overcoming codependency, that's the title that resonated with me. And then as I've dove deeper into the conversation, I realized, like talking with you, right, it is about this just continuous practice. I don't really believe anymore that there's this destination called, overcome, check mark. Right?
Yeah.
We're done. It's a lifelong journey. And, Rosemary has exercises, tools, tips for you to be able to continuously practice, because we're never going to be done practicing. It's just
right. Right. And it's like overcoming it in the moment. Just the moment. It's all about, I still slip every once in a while, but I'll tell you, if I look back to where I started 18 years ago to where I am today, I mean, I know the tools. And if I choose to not pick them up, well, I know them because I've practiced them off long enough. And so a lot of the people in my world have not done one thing to change, but the relationships have changed because I've changed. And that's just was news to me that is possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. And everybody, quick reminder. So the 2 buttons over to this program that we've just been talking about from Rosemary, again, $20 off. So super discount is below the video, and you can also grab her free gift as well. So thank you for everything. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. Yes, I know. Thank you for the work you do. And my pleasure. And I hope we've helped some people out there. One person changing in the world can make the biggest change, but it starts with us.
It certainly does. Do you have any last insights, tools, tips, or any last things you feel like you want to share with everyone before we hop off?
Just be real kind and gentle with yourself. Just be real kind and gentle with yourself. Because once we learn how to do that, we'll be able to do that with others, and our lives will completely change. So don't give up. You're an amazing human being. And if you're struggling with anything, everything can be healed.
I love it. Thank you. That is a very inspiring way to end things. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, to this really amazing interview with Rosemary. And here is to our collective journey to self-love and healthy relationships. Bye, everybody. Hey everyone, I just got off a really incredible interview with Rosemary O'Connor. I really loved her take on codependency. I love that she comes from a background of alcoholism herself, and how she was really authentically sharing about her story with her children, and how challenging that was for her family and for herself, and how she's, made a career out of this and helping moms and, in getting over this codependency and the addictions and stuff in their lives. So I really was very impressed by Rosemary's interview. A couple of big take-home messages are awareness, right? It comes down to awareness. If we're not aware of our codependent nature, right? If we're not aware of the fact that we're trying to control our partner, or we're trying to control our children, or we're not aware of our thoughts of shame and guilt and that kind of stuff, or emotions, anger, whatever it is, it's really hard to change if we're not aware. So a common thread in this whole series is becoming aware of how we act, how we behave, what we're thinking, why we do the things that we do, and all of that. So awareness. So that's one big take home. And the other one I really loved was when she talked about control. I think this is such a big thing. So many of us are, right, control freaks. So many of us are trying to control our lives, ourselves, our partners, our children, our dogs, like the outcomes of our lives. We want to control them. We want to know what's going to happen next. You know, my partner Ike has always been really good about helping me through this. And he talks about like getting comfortable being in the unknown zone, right? As opposed to always having to know and control what's happening in your life, get comfortable being in that unknown zone. We don't always have to know, because ultimately we don't know what's going to happen next. So I really love that Rosemary dove into this topic of control and how it relates to codependency. Another thing I really enjoyed was how she related it to safety, and how so many people have control issues and are overly controlling in their life because they don't feel safe. So this is a big thing for me. When she said that, like I said, I got the chills. It rings a bell with me. It resonates with me, because clearly there's something in my past that, you know, this comes up, and there's a reason because of it. So take a look at your life. I'm going to do the same thing. Take a look at your past, your childhood, whatever it is, your relationships, past relationships. How does your want to control others and safety, what do they have to do with each other, right? Did you not feel safe as a kid physically, or was it just emotionally? Where is it in your life that you felt unsafe? So I just want you to take a look at that. And again, I'm going to as well. And that's it. Rosemary O'Connor, amazing, amazing woman, and doing amazing work in the world. So I will see you on the next interview, and thanks so much for tuning in. Bye, everybody.